morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Or is that TV morning news? It's getting harder and harder to tell these days as the lines continue to blur. For instance, today I have 3 stories about movies going to the small screen, or at least potentially going to the small screen. Now, as some of you alerted me over the weekend, Simon Kinberg, he is a writer-producer on the X-Men movies. He's handling a lot of the publicity now because Bryan Singer has had to understandably take a step back. But he has teased the idea that Marvel will begin developing TV versions of its properties. All properties apparently are also fair game. Now there are a couple issues at hand here. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's budget. Even Kinberg in his interview acknowledged that the big hurdle for these characters going to the small screen is being able to appropriately convey them with a limited budget. You know, these require a lot of special effects, especially when dealing with mutants. And you know, I think they've tried to do mutant-esque TV shows in the past, and they often have very low-key powers, or you know, they hardly ever use their powers. I think people liked Heroes because they use their powers the most. I think we've seen to date. There are a couple cable shows that are X-Men ripoff, or I guess homages. I'm sorry, but even there, you're not seeing anywhere near what you see in the movies. So if people see the X-Men brand, they might be very well disappointed if they see a greatly scaled down display of powers. But Kinberg said he feels that special effects are getting closer to the point where they can maybe satisfy the audience while also satisfying their budget restraints. So that's one issue. He also said that the reason they're considering television is because the movies, as we all know, are so crowded they're actually bursting out of the big screen into the small screen. It is the small little cup that catches apparently the spillover of the movies. He feels there's just so many properties they aren't utilizing, or I guess some fans would say ruining, that they want to try and see what they can do with them on the small screen. I guess because they paid a lot of money for these properties, I can understand it would be frustrating for Fox. They're just essentially sitting in a drawer, when especially we have such a competitive field right now with superhero properties. Also, I guess that's another element of it. Fox sees DC with Gotham. Fox is Gotham. I'll get to that. That's the second story today. Fox is Gotham. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC. And, of course, the Marvel Netflix deal. They see all the other all the other studios with their comic book properties getting into television, and I think they feel maybe there's something here we don't want to be left behind. I'll be interested to see if Sony soon follows suit with some kind of Spider-Man TV show. Maybe that's where we can get our Miles Morales, if we can hopefully get him at all. I mean, on a side note, the producers of the Spider-Man series, even though Andrew Garfield's been open to the idea, he obviously has no say in it, the producers have been pretty adamant they're not going to go the Miles Morales route, which I think is a shame to not even be considering that. But perhaps for a television series? Alright, so anyway, what properties could they potentially develop into a TV show? Well, of course, there's the X-Men, the Fantastic Four. That seems like a weird spin-off, unless you were going to do the Future Foundation. But then, if, you know, who would be in it, and how would you have your, you know, with the X-Men, they're always secondary teams. But the Fantastic Four, if you don't have your 4 main characters from the movie, how can you have a television show? But as I said, the Future Foundation could be a route they go there. Almost like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. What happens at the Baxter Building when the Fantastic Four are away? I don't know. No one's really been that interested in that before, but maybe they will on television. Speaking of X-Men teams, X-Force is apparently being listed, at least in the Hollywood trades, as a different property separate from X-Men, which I find very odd because it's part of the X-Men brand. But Fox is considering it its own entity. I don't know why they're so keen on X-Force. There are a lot of other, I think, much more interesting X-Men stories and teams that they can go after. For instance, New Mutants, which are also on their list. That's the teen version, you know, the kids in training at the Xavier Institute. So that could maybe be an interesting television show because you can just use the excuse that they don't know how to use their powers yet in a manner that requires a lot of special effects. Let's just talk about what your powers might be. That seems super boring. All right, so anyway, X-Force, I guess because of the violent nature of X-Force, recently in the comics. That's not always been a big thing. You could also play off X-Force being a government agency for some time in the comics, but still, its big players was Mystique, for instance, Mystique and Sabretooth, and those are in the movies. But then the one that really interests me is Deadpool. Now, so many of you, a number of fans, I'm not a big, huge Deadpool fan, I have to say. I think I only really enjoyed the stories when, you know, the old Joe Kelly stories that I've seen, but otherwise, and Gail Simone to some degree, when that was her actually first writing gig, but for some reason Deadpool at large doesn't click with me, but he certainly has his fan base. And he's very funny and a very, you know, he breaks the fourth wall all the time. He's, I think, Marvel's most humorous character, really out there, and I think that would really help offset a lack of special effects if you had clever writing and this interesting character with a huge fan base. So I think Deadpool, because I think we're not getting that movie. It's so far away from ever happening, and I don't think Ryan Reynolds would ever be in it, especially after what happened with Green Lantern. So instead of us waiting for a Deadpool movie, which we're never going to get, I'd love to see him perhaps on a television show. Now, while Warner Brothers and DC are putting their Gotham show on Fox, Fox, of course, has access to all of its channels, television channels. So there's Fox, Network TV, but then there's also FX, which has some wonderful television shows. I love The Americans, I love Justified, and this new Fargo show, if you're not watching that, it's very, very well done. So I think that if you take FX's sensibilities and their track record, you can potentially come up with an exciting X-Men or some kind of Marvel via Fox television show. But we'll see. I mean, so far, what do we have here on TV? We've had Smallville, of course, Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey did not work. I thought it was medium. I never got into Smallville. I had a lot of problems with Smallville. I didn't like the Superman tweens aspect to it. Then, of course, Arrow is extremely popular right now. I don't know if it's actually a huge hit, but it certainly is a cult hit. So much so that they're spinning off a Flash TV series, much to the annoyance of many Flash fans, because that might mean he's not going to be in the films. But then also, of course, there's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. over on ABC, which I think has disappointed most of us, although some of you are still hanging on, are loyal to Agent Coulson and his crew. And then, of course, there's the Marvel Netflix deal, which is quite a ways out at this point. I mean, they're getting ready to go into production soon, I believe, but still, you have some time here. So that's the landscape that has occurred and is, right now. And I think there's nothing totally that exciting on a broad scale in the small screen when it comes to superhero properties. Certainly nothing like the movies. I think people had hoped Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be that. I'm certain that Disney Marvel hoped it would be that, and as did ABC. But it just really hasn't gelled to the point where many of you, and I would agree with this, don't see a second season in the works. In the cards, I guess is the appropriate term. But anyway, speaking of network comic book shows, Gotham's first trailer premiered last night during 24 Live Another Day. And it really was just an instant phenomenon. I mean, this is, the next Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Hopefully only to the point of its premiere. And then it's actually successful. But, it has over 700,000 views of the extended trailer here on YouTube in less than 24 hours. And I have to say, I went to my parents' house to watch 24 because, we're all 24 fans. We've watched all the shows together. So we thought we would continue that tradition with the new series, revisiting it. And I have to say, when this trailer came on, my parents were very intrigued, to the point that we rewound it and watched it again, because we don't watch live TV, as I don't think most people do. We were watching this on DVR a couple of, half an hour in so we could skip commercials. But they loved it. Now, to be fair, they did like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the premise of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They were very excited about that, particularly my mom. But because she was a big fan of Agent Coulson. But when the show came on, they agreed with me. They just were not into it. They didn't like what they saw. But they're really excited. Their hopes are raised again for Gotham. And again, also my mom in particular really thought it was exciting. She even said, "Wow, what's this?" when it came on. So that just speaks not just to that this show looks good, but that it's able to cross over to mainstream fans who don't read comic books. My parents don't read comic books. So I think that's very encouraging for Gotham. So that's the second story. We're going to talk about this Gotham TV show. Now, I've reviewed the trailer over on Think About the Ink, but the short of it is, I really like it. And I'll tell you, you might be like, Grace, it goes against everything you stand for adapting comic book properties to television. And that's true, but I explain why it works somehow over on Think About the Ink. But let's just speak to, what is at stake here for Warner Brothers and DC, and potentially Fox. Now, right off the bat, you might be thinking, Grace, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it was done in by being on a network, and we've discussed that numerous times. And we've hoped against hope, that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be on a cable network, so that it could actually be good, and they could take risks and do something, and not have to be episodic in nature. You can only tune in for one episode. I'm not sure how much that is the case with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I'm sure there's some element to that, because network television is very concerned, obviously, with that bottom line. They're a little bit stuck in the past in that regard, and so we'll see if they evolve with shows like Gotham. So we'll see how episodic Gotham is, but I have to say, 24, the show with which this trailer premiered, was another big hit for Fox, and more sophisticated and a step above than your normal network fare, which is why 24 was so successful for so long. It was something that wasn't episodic. You had to watch all the episodes to know what was going on, and it was a sophisticated and exciting storytelling. So if Fox could pull that off, I have a little more faith that maybe they could pull off Gotham. Do I wish this was on FX? Sure I do. I think that would be a lot better. As I was just talking about, they have a very good track record for the X-Men shows, potentially. But we'll see what Fox, the actual network, can do. Perhaps it'll afford Gotham a bigger audience because if, they just have a wider scope in terms of who they reach. So I think this is very exciting. Now, also, there's been some question as to whether or not this will be continuity that plays into the DC Cinematic Universe. I mentioned this before. I don't see how it can't, especially if it's as big a hit as I think it's going to be. We'll see if they actually can deliver on the promise, but so far so good. It has been picked up to series, by the way. That was also that was the big headline yesterday until the trailer itself premiered and just wiped that story off the front page. But it is going to become a show and will be airing in the fall of 2014. And look, that's about 2 years out, or at least a year and a half out from your next DC movie. So if this is as big a hit as I think it's going to be again, how can they not funnel that fan base into the movies? It would be ridiculous. So I think it would be very interesting to see what happens here. And to have TV leading a cinematic universe rather than the films would be a fascinating development. But we all know that when it comes to DC properties and the way they're depicted over at Warner Brothers, movies have never been their strongest point, with the exception of Nolan's trilogy, which was really self-contained. But they've always excelled more so in their animated. I guess you could say Superman was very popular back with Donner, but I think just overall today's landscape, I'm talking about today's comic book movie landscape, they are certainly much more revered and getting it right in animation and video games. Video games actually the most right now, but maybe thanks to Gotham, Warner Brothers DC will find a bright spot again and be able to surge in their constant battle against Marvel and Disney. They'll be able to surge past them and get a win. And I think it's great that this revolves around Gordon. And I also wonder if they're going to have Gordon in the movies, who will play Gordon in that incarnation. Will it be Ben McKenzie, who is going to inhabit this role on the small screen? Will they have to cast someone to look older? I don't know. I really miss Jim Gordon, played by Gary Oldman. I thought he was phenomenal. I loved his look, especially in The Dark Knight. He looked phenomenal when he took, after that chase sequence. Oh, everyone's seen The Dark Knight by now. When he revealed that it was, him under that SWAT uniform, he just looked super cool. And it was really nice to see Jim Gordon be cool. But I am open to the idea of Ben McKenzie in the role. So it's fascinating to see this discussion of comic books move over to the small screen a little bit, because look what they're doing. And is this a danger for these comic book movies to switch the discussion to the small screen, or is it just all becoming one universe like they hope? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as I said again, was supposed to be the first, the game changer that allowed that to happen. It has not. Maybe again, Fox's Gotham will be the one that succeeds in that area. But I'm very excited. And if you've seen the trailer, again, you can check out my review over and think about the ink, but I'm curious down below what you think of it. All right, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link in the video description. The third story, what else could we be talking about on television? Well, it's not just reserved for comic book movies going to the small screen. We're also seeing actual films. For instance, I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Fargo. Fargo is a very popular show on FX, very well done, and now it looks like Spike Lee is going to Showtime. It was announced yesterday that he's developing She's Gotta Have It, his debut feature film, which put him on the map, also helped indie films considerably as a whole, but he's developing it as a half-hour series that he will write and direct. Now, there's a lot of very interesting things about this. First of all, there aren't a lot of, African-American centric cable television shows out there. I guess to some degree there's HBO's Treem, but beyond that, not a lot. So I think this could really find a good niche for itself and a way to stand out in what's getting to be a very crowded television arena. So, and also, of course, Spike Lee's name. And I think Spike Lee's name still means something, despite the fact that, I think it still means something to the media and to audiences. I think they would give this a shot, even though it doesn't seem to mean much when it comes to movies. Perhaps because he's moved away from his trademark. Whether artists like to admit it or not, they are a brand. And I think Spike Lee's brand has become muddled. For instance, he did make Red Hook Summer recently, but that didn't even make $400,000 in the movie theater. Can you believe that? A Spike Lee movie not even making $500,000. So I guess he was like, nobody wants to see my brand, at least on the big screen. And of course he did Old Boy recently, that infamous film, as you might recall from my review of it. But that only made $2.1 million, the Old Boy remake. And then Miracle at St. Anna's in 2008 was his last mainstream film. And he has not had a particularly strong box office record at any point. His most successful film to date worldwide is Inside Man. That was a very traditional, heist caper with Clive Owen and Jodie Foster, as you might recall. And then, of course, Malcolm X was pretty well received. I didn't see an overseas release for that, which I thought was interesting when I was researching my notes for this. Then Jungle Fever did very well thanks to the overseas market, and also Do the Right Thing. But still, never a big box office performer. And so this is another instance. We've seen a lot of on-camera talent go to the small screen in the hopes of revitalizing their career. Kevin Spacey, for instance, is someone that we've all been talking about recently with his Call of Duty trailer. He went to Netflix for House of Cards to revive his career. Billy Bob Thornton is on Fargo over on FX. And now you see behind-the-camera talent also going to television. I think it's very fascinating. Although in the same breath, we can talk about how Sam Mendes is also on Showtime with Penny Dreadful, and he's directing. He just directed the most successful James Bond of all time, and he's working on the next. And then also J.A. Bayona is a Sam Mendes partner there to some degree, and J.A. Bayona signed up for a lot of great properties, and he's still working in film, no problem. That's why I'm excited about Penny Dreadful, because of that behind-the-scenes talent, as well as the on-camera talent. And that, for instance, Eva Green is in that show. So again, you're seeing a real blurring of the lines and where you can act. At least when it comes to cable, where you can act or direct or write. At least when it comes to cable TV. Network TV still isn't there. You're not seeing any movie stars or people who are in movies, I guess, to use the term movie star loosely. You're not seeing them on network TV still. Those actors aren't going to network TV, but they seem to not have a problem going to cable. So I wouldn't expect Gotham to have any big stars, movie stars. Maybe TV stars might show up, but maybe perhaps on Fox were to do an FX show, they can maybe get some bigger name talent, and then of course maybe Spike Lee. We'll see who he can get. This could be a great opportunity in a growing field of opportunities for African American actors. So that's the third story of the day. Now on to the viewer question, which comes from Rasan Footman. And Rasan says, with the summer blockbuster season upon us, I was wondering about these early releases. It seems like rather than extending the summer movie season, it robs July and August to pay for April and May. Last year, the summer season began early, but it ended early, with Lone Ranger and Monsters University barely registering by 4th of July. Great observation, Rasan, and I really think that's what's happening. Now, first of all, though, to be fair, May has always been a part of the summer movie season. The first weekend in May kicks it off. I know June is technically summer, but for a very long time, May has been the big summer release date because you're getting ready to go into Memorial Day at the end of the month. So I think that May to August has been your traditional summer movie season. But actually, it's been May. This is the old school way. Is May to July was your summer movie season, where August was almost like your maverick month. You put out the stuff that you thought might stick, but you weren't sure. And you saw movies like The Expendables debut in August. That's what that's usually been used for. But of course, summer has become so crowded, and they insist on releasing only one movie a weekend, which I think is a big problem. And I'll get to that in a moment. So you have to see these movies spread out. Now, famously or infamously to some of their competition, Marvel started the summer early and with the first weekend in April with Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and had a very strong debut and have had a very successful run, largely because they had no competition for the entire month of April. Nobody jumped in there and saw that opportunity. They will next year. In fact, you even see, as I've mentioned before, the Wolverine sequel is slated for the first weekend in March 2017. So that's very interesting to see, maybe the summer movie season extending to the beginning of March, Rasan. That might be your 2-month extension. But I do agree that it robs July and August, especially even though July, and maybe even mid-June if this continues, of some of their momentum. And the reason is, I think it comes from moviegoer fatigue. At least that was my impression last year. I mean, you mentioned The Lone Ranger and Monsters University, Rasan, and I think that both those movies, especially Lone Ranger, I liked part of The Lone Ranger, but overall they were disappointments. And even though I liked The Lone Ranger, it wasn't without some serious flaws. So, I think that what happened was not only too many movies came out and the summer movie season started too soon, but you had a lot of disappointment. And eventually, when people go to the movie every weekend, if they don't leave having a good time, just like you saw last summer, they're going to eventually decide, you know what, I'm tired of ruining my summer and sitting through crap. I'm just going to go do something else, and I'll catch these movies when they come out on demand. And I think that could happen this summer. I'm very concerned with the summer season this year because of the start that it's gotten off to. I think that Spider-Man has been very, very mixed in the way it's been received. It had a depressed opening, as we discussed yesterday on Movie Math. Still strong, but not what it should have been for a sequel in that release date. Now, we don't know if Captain America is responsible for that in terms of undercutting it with being the movie that started the summer, and maybe also just in the quality of that film and how it raised the bar. But think about it. We've had just The Amazing Spider-Man this past weekend. Now we have Neighbors coming up. That's a small film, so this isn't a 1-2 punch to start off the summer. It seems like a slow start, so hopefully Neighbors will deliver. We'll see. Then you have Godzilla, which I think is going to surprise a lot of people. I feel people are going to be divided about that as well. You might have noticed that they're really hiding from the American audience what that movie really is about. About the multiple monsters and Godzilla. I don't want to give it away in case you want to go in fresh, but that's being hidden. So I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when they go into the theater, and we'll see how they react. So that's a risk. Then you have X-Men Days of Future Past. We also don't know how that's going to be received. That's another iffy property. The X-Men First Class was, I believe, I'm pretty sure, the lowest grossing movie in the X-Men franchise to date. So you're not coming off of a strong previous film. And then you have Maleficent, which we're also hearing mixed things about. Some of the buzz isn't great. The Disney perhaps might be worried about the film. So if that's your May, are people already, when they go into June, going to be like, whoa, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go enjoy my summer. I think some movies will be immune to that. For instance, sequels like 22 Jump Street, where people know what they're going to get. They have faith because the team will deliver again. And that means because there's a good trailer and it's coming off a previously strong film. So I think that would succeed. But it's scary stuff. And I think that as I said, I don't think they should release just one movie a weekend because it gives too much. It puts too much. Not just pressure on that film to perform, but it relies too much on that film to perform. Look what happened here with kicking off of May. I'm not saying another big blockbuster should have opened, but there could have been potentially a sleeper hit presented as counter-programming. Why didn't Neighbors open opposite The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then we could have moved another blockbuster into the slot the second weekend of May? I just feel that you have a situation where everyone gets really excited about one movie. It's the movie to see. Hollywood's very nice. They're taking turns, but then when everybody walks out disappointed, it's going to hurt everybody else who's waiting, all the other movies waiting in line. That's what happens when you decide to stay and take turns. So what do you guys think? Do you like the summer movie release schedule? We've been talking about this a lot. I've seen a lot of your comments in addition that I think a lot of you are starting to move away from the necessity for summer movie seasons. You just want to see movies come out when they're ready because a good movie is a good movie, and I think Captain America has helped prove that to some degree. I don't know if a really big movie could open in January or February. We'll see, but you never know. So write your thoughts down below. Thank you for your question, Rasan. I think you really hit the nail on the head. And please write down below what everybody here thinks, what you guys all think of the top 3 stories, this whole movies to TV and the blurring of the line there. And do you think it will help everybody, or do you think it might really, the big loser potentially here is film? I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I do feel that going to the movie is going to become a upmarket experience, where if you're going to pay a lot of money to see a movie in the theater, you're going to have reserved seating, a waiter, a nice chair, and they're going to police all the cell phone chatter and stuff and the talking. But at the same time, it's going to be expensive to go and see a movie in theaters, or you can see it at home, either day and date, or very shortly after, as Jeffrey Katzenberg announced it, or put forward, and we discussed recently. So anyway, write your thoughts about all this down below, and also any questions that you might like to have answered tomorrow or in a future episode in the short future. Just remember, if you ask a question, I might, just because I don't answer it the next day doesn't mean I might not have saved it for a future episode. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.